Hey everyone! I've been making content for YouTube for quite a while now, and lately I feel like I'm more of a content creator than a model builder. But let's change that up a bit and build a scale model. And here it is, the Tamiya Spitfire Mk.VIII in 32 scale. Just like pretty much all Tamiya kits, this one is excellently engineered. Tamiya really gives their 32 scale kits special attention. You can easily see that from what's included in the box. The kit comes with a seriously detailed Merlin engine that's just begging for extra detailing. And in this video I'm going to show you how I tackled building this engine. I did quite a bit of research before starting because I really didn't want to mess up connecting that oil pipe to the water pump. I recorded pretty much every step, explaining things in detail, so this can be a guide for you guys. By the way, I already cut and cleaned the parts that even start gluing the main parts together. Overall, the assembly has been pretty smooth sailing. However, some areas need filler and every single part required some cleanup and leveling. I've also finished assembling the carburetor and supercharger in the meantime. These little things you are seeing are magnets that came with the kit. Somehow their coating has come off and they are covered in this metal dust. Gluing them in this state could be a problem, so I'm playing it safe with the baking soda and super glue combo. This part here is the intercooler. The reason I glue magnets on is to temporarily secure the cowling that will go on top. This way, when the model is finished, you can display it with either the engine exposed or closed up, however you like. Now it's time for the engine block and crankcase. This PE thread also came with the kit. I need to drill out the marked spots for the inner spark plug inlets. These parts I actually designed and 3D printed myself. And these are the priming pipes. Yep, I designed and 3D printed these too. This part is the pipe for the ignition cables on the top of the engine. The top part of the engine is pretty much done for now. Let's move on to building the intercooler water pump. But first, let me show you a little trick on how to bend a brass tube without kinking it. Yep, heating and cooling metal parts makes them softer and easier to bend. This part was a missing detail on the water pump. Now let's get back to the building the pump. I'm attaching the 3D printed bolts, nuts and pipe inlets and outlets to the pump. After gluing the 3D printed manufacturer's plate onto the manifold covers, I'm also attaching the nose case. The relief valves unit looked a bit too flat to my eye. So I carved out some details and added dimension with parts I designed myself. Of course, I didn't use 3D printed parts for every single detail. There is one more missing detail. the coolant pipes that connect to the header tank. And now I can bring these two parts together. The left magneto was missing some details. Here is how I added them. As you can see, I've glued many connection points for the oil pipes in their places. Now I'm attaching the pipes to these. Let's continue with the coolant system. The air filter. I didn't add too many extra detail to this part. I'm adding the details related to the lubrication and fuel systems. Alright, let's build these flexible hoses from scratch. First, I create the texture by wrapping a thinner wire around a thicker aluminum wire that I've bent into shape. Then I coat this texture with liquid putty to smooth it out. This is the boost control unit. The part that came with the kit was quite basic, so I designed a new one and had it 3D printed. The levers that connect to the boost control unit are also missing details. Let's add those. I'm adding the 3D printed spark plug details. For the braided shielding, I simply soak appropriately sized threads in acrylic paint to create the surface texture first. Later, I will paint these in the correct color and attach them in their places. Finally, I can move on to painting. First up, the primer. For a more realistic result, I paint the engine with 3 different blacks: matte black, tire black and semi-gloss black. Using these 2 metallic paints, I also paint these parts. And paint the remaining details. I applied a gloss varnish to all non-metallic parts. I'm going to apply a multi-stage weathering process. First, I'm applying a light colored wash to bring out the details in the black areas. I'm carefully cleaning off the excess wash. The left magneto has cable connections on both sides. You probably remember the thread I painted a little while ago. The felt strip details on the frames where the cowling attach are quite noticeable. Here is how I simply added that detail. By the way, I also paint the exhaust. Here are two tips that will come in handy when working with cables and wires: straightening and softening. Alright, this is the firewall. I added a few simple details, the rest is as it came with the kit. That's why I haven't shown the building stage up until now. Before the matte varnish, I add all the aluminum pipes. I will add the copper ones later. I'm applying a lacquer-based matte varnish because I will be doing a weathering process with a lot of lighter fluid. As I mentioned before, I applied a multi-stage weathering process. Applying it all at once can very likely create a uniform and unnatural looking effect. Here is a tip for adding more details to cables and pipes. These header-cooler connection pipes come with the kit, and they fit perfectly into their places. After adding all these details, fitting the engine into place wasn't exactly a walk in the park. Mr. Tamiya really secured things with this screw. The engine is fixed in place quite well. Let's add the remaining details and finish the assembly. Oh, and I almost forgot. For critical gluing tasks, this is my new favorite, UV light curing liquid resin. There were two missing details on the oil tank, and you can see them on it now. White glue is my go-to adhesive for scenarios like this because it can be cleaned up with water. Now it's time for the final weathering. For this I will be using extra soft pastels, Tamiya panel liners and Zippo lighter fluid. Why Zippo? Because it dries very quickly and dissolves the pigments real well. I can see the result quickly and apply the next layers. I'm applying a wash over the effect with Tamiya panel liner. This both seals the effect and adds extra depth. Hi there! Let's move on and build the cockpit. I know this project is moving a bit slowly, but most of my time goes into research and planning. Honestly, the building part is the easiest. Tamiya only gives us one cockpit frame with enough detail, plus 2 PE threads. I start by priming the metal parts. This primer is fantastic. First, I prep the fuselage hulls for assembly and paint, adding a few bits, cleaning up some areas and removing what needs to go. Tamiya molded the cockpit floor like this. Don't forget to include this part when building the cockpit. You will thank me later. I continue by cutting and cleaning the cockpit pieces one by one. I drill out the lightning holes on the frame with the proper diameter bit so they look like the real thing. A simple process, but the result looks great. Here, there is supposed to be a slot for the elevator control cables. Tamiya only molded a right detail, so I open up the slot properly. I also filled and sent visible pin marks. From here, I am taking a different approach than the manual. To add more detail and keep paint control easier, I am finishing the cockpit walls separately. I've got a 3D print toolbox set with parts I often use. I will add some missing details from that set. By the way, I still haven't finalized what will be included in that toolbox set. But I will be offering it as a complete set soon. As I always say, heated copper wire bends just like lead wire. CA glue can drive you crazy in cases like this, so I play it safe and attach critical parts using UV resin. Windscreen de-icing system details done. Here is the harness release control, but it's missing some details. The undercarriage control unit lever also needs extra work. I'm not 100% sure this variant had it, but I will add the removed contactor anyway. All these details are built from plastic sheet, rod and various wires, cut and glued in place one by one. I will show how I scratch built some of them. You have probably figured out the basic process already. So I will mostly show them being installed. This PE part is flat, so I add a small knob with UV resin to give it proper shape. I believe this is the camera indicator mount. Cockpit light detail. Let's scratch build the oxygen hose. Now let's upgrade the control stick. First I remove excess detail and correct the elevator linkage. The kit part is too short. These will be the pneumatic system hoses. I add the brake operating cable and connect it to the brake lever. The control stick is done. Now for the elevator linkage. I cut this piece from the sprue because the circular shape is just the size I need. I'm showing you this just as an example. I choose the one marked with an H because it has a clear cutting line. The linkage bar between the mechanism should be about this long. Let's prepare the rudder pedals. I also assembled the instrument panel and seat. At this point, I realized something. On this version, the voltage regulator isn't here. It's on the port side of the cockpit. So I need to move it there and shift the switch and fuses to the right. Perfect. More work. Well, starting is half the battle. Let's do it. I fix any issues caused while removing molded details. I add a box under disket piece using some plastic sheet, then add extra details to it. These two frame connections will be different. I will use this part for that. Don't throw away the leftover sections. We will use them later to fill the empty areas on the frames. And that completes the major modification. There is one more thing: the radiator flap pneumatic system. First, I borrow this part from the X sprue. That's done for now. Let's build the pneumatic system behind the seat. And now I detail these compressed air bottles, the source of the pneumatic system. To break that harsh metal look on PE belts and give them more natural curves, I heat them first. They become much softer and drape realistically. I bent 8mm up and 4mm down, just like in the instructions. I test fit them and shape them in place. You can also see some details I add earlier. Now I can paint, but first primer. I hand paint the details. A gloss coat evens out the finish and protects everything for wash. I apply a simple wash with a homemade mix that's not too dark. Once I clean up the excess, I seal everything with a matte coat. Tamiya suggests placing the dial decals behind the clear lenses. Some modelers prefer placing them on the front for more realism, but I think the magnifying effect makes them easier to see like this. Glass effect on the compass. Now I can start the final assembly. I installed rudder and elevator control cables. To keep the cables in the right form, I glue a small hidden support piece. And the cockpit is complete. Hey, welcome back! In the first part, we built a super detailed Merlin engine. In part 2, we complete the cockpit with several scratch build details and corrections. And now, we have finally reached the final stage. Before closing up the fuselage, there are a few things to take care of. For the removable magnetic system, I'm carefully mounting the magnets and metal plates into their designated spots. To avoid any alignment issues, I'm joining the fuselage house step by step. Tamiya has this specific solution for the moving parts. Since this is my first time building this kit, I'm sticking to their recommended method. However, if I ever build this again, I will definitely skip the gimmick and just glue the parts permanently. On flat, white surfaces like wings, gaps or fitment issues usually happen because the matting surfaces aren't cleaned properly. I'm making sure all contact points are perfectly leveled and sanded. As you can see, the moving parts system is working as intended. Let's add a subtle effect to the tail wheel. The landing gear struts are reinforced with steel pins. Even though it adds a bit more work, I think it's a great precaution against breakage in this large scale. I know. You have been watching me assemble the tail wheel and its components for a while now. It's taking longer than usual because of this removable system. If you are planning to display your model with the gear down, my advice is to just glue it and save yourself the trouble. Don't be like me. The lower wing section is molded as a single piece, but it requires some serious cleaning, sanding and modification. Let's take it one step at a time. For these kinds of precision cuts, I'm using my go-to method, a simple sewing needle. After a bit of cleanup, the result is perfect. On this specific variant, the lower light has been relocated to the bottom. Because of this, I need to remove the upper light detail. I'm masking off the surrounding areas to protect the surface detail. A little sanding and the job is done. The landing gear struts and base are quite complex with many parts. I noticed a missing linkage arm that connects them. Even though it will be barely visible, I just couldn't leave it out. Now I'm opening up the slots for these parts. Unnecessary complexity is usually a headache. But when it's Tamiya, it actually feels purposeful. The kit comes with two different wingtip options. You pick the one that fits your version. And flawless engineering. This hatch should be open if the flaps are down and closed if they are up. I'm building mine in the closed position. I'm painting the radiators at this stage and protecting them with some masking tape. I've prepared all the removable parts so the aircraft can be displayed in different configurations. To be honest, I'm not entirely happy with the final result of the removable system. Next time I will pick an option and stick to it. There is a mold line on the canopy that needs to be cleared. It's not rocket science, just the usual routine, and done. You will have to cut the masks yourselves for this one. The piping detail that comes with the kit looked a bit out of scale. So I'm adding some of my own detail to the landing gear. Now it's finally time for some color. First, the primer. I'm not aiming for a perfectly homogeneous surface here. As long as it provides good bite for the paint, it's fine. I am painting the canopy frames first. The windshield parts are black and the rest is in the cockpit color. After painting the metallic parts, I'm using the leftover paint to do a final check for any surface imperfections. I am starting the main paint job from the underside. After applying the gray, I am using Cockpit for masking to get those nice soft edge transitions. Once the remaining details are painted, I am applying a coat of gloss varnish. I am not going to show you the first rating decal stage. They are old, thick and surprisingly brittle. They took up way too much of my time. Honestly, a decal set like this doesn't belong in a kit of this quality. Do yourself a favor and get a good aftermarket set. Let's mix a custom wash. I'm using Zippo lighter fluid and Tamiya panel liner. This way, the viscosity is much better for flowing into the details. While wiping off the wash, the gun port covers got ruined. So I cut some strips from baking paper instead, paint them and attach them with white glue. The texture looks just like fabric, much better than the decals. I'm trying to hide those thick decals under a coat of matte varnish. My post-shading technique consists of 3 phases. In phase 1, I'm fading the entire paint job. This is a very time-consuming and tedious process. Let me show you on this decal. I'm not painting it white, I'm just fading the tones. Then I'm blending everything with the same white to break the contrast. For the next phase, you need to choose lighter tones. This is the question I get asked the most. How do I decide which color to use? Look, this is the base color and these are the alternatives. The base paint is a bluish tone. The top alternative has blue undertones, but the other one is more green. The green base paint contains a lot of yellow, so I'm picking the alternative that contains yellow, whereas the other one has more blue in it. I'm applying the light green randomly. The light green gets the same treatment. Now, using highly thinned base paint, I'm painting the borders first and the centers to create the effect. I make sure to apply more of the base paint to areas that get less sun, creating a natural upward fade. On these aircraft, you can often see the old roundels faintly showing through the fresh coat of paint. I am applying that ghosting effect now. For the metallic chipping effect, the best tool is the Prismacolor PC949. Adding some wear and tear to the wing leading edges. I am still not a fan of this landing gear system. The tires are okay, but you are better off finding a better replacement. No, I'm not going to show you how I peel off the canopy masks one by one. Instead, let me show you something actually useful. See this? This is not a paint leak. You don't need to remove the canopy. It's usually just paint dust. Find a flexible tool, wrap some cotton around the tip and dampen it. That's all it takes. Phase 3. Applying a dark filter. For this, I'm using my airbrushes that allow for sharper lines. My choice is GSI Creos. It is very easy to overdo it at this stage. You have to know when to stop before you turn the model into a coloring book. I love this antique paint. You need to buff the buffing version after it dries, and it gives a fantastic finish. After adding a bit of dust and oil, the weathering is complete. Once the final parts are attached, the model is finished. As I said, I really didn't enjoy this removable gimmick. Thanks for watching.